What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the JT Sports Podcast. I'm your host, JT. You know, something that is new but very fun to do in the off season for me is to keep tabs on the legal battles with all the players that are trying to get an extra year of eligibility, taking the NCAA to court. It seems like anytime they get denied, hey, keep suing them until eventually you come across a judge that's an alum of your university and he grants you your 6th year. Trinidad Chambliss is back for one more season in Oxford for Ole Miss, and I was looking forward to seeing him in the NFL draft because I had my fingers crossed that the Steelers would be able to select him. But no, he opted to forego the NFL, wanted to stay in college football one last year, even though he's good enough to last in the NFL for a very long time, in my opinion. Very athletic, very good arm with impressive accuracy. So why did Trinidad Chambliss duck the NFL? Is he scared? Does he feel like he's not ready quite yet? Or was Ole Miss giving him an offer that he just couldn't refuse? We'll dive into Trinidad Chambliss' decision to return to Ole Miss, winning his extra year of eligibility in court. And while we're on the subject of quarterbacks coming back in college football, I want to rank my top 10 quarterbacks for this upcoming season, or give my projections for who I feel are going to be the top 10 quarterbacks at the end of the 2026 campaign. I got outlooks for Oklahoma, Michigan. How good is Darian Mensah going to make Miami? And last week, I released my way too early top 25. This go around, I'm here with my way too early full college football playoff predictions. If you live, eat, breathe, and die football, you will have come to the right place. We're talking all things football, NFL, college football, 24/7, 365 days throughout the year. If you don't want the starting quarterback for your favorite team next season to play like Anthony Richardson, do yourself, your team, and yours truly a favor. Smash that like button, turn on post notifications, subscribe so you don't miss when we drop new content. Also, check us out on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast from. JT Sports is available. Give us a 5-star review if you enjoy, and let's dive into it. Trinidad Chambliss is back for one last ride at Ole Miss. He has been granted one final year of eligibility. It's a little bit sketchy how he got this extra year. He initially lost his first legal battle with the NCAA for extra year eligibility. It looked like he was going to be in this year's NFL draft, but when all else fails, keep taking the NCAA to court. Hope that you're lucky enough to get a judge that is an alum of the university that you're trying to get an extra year for, and that's all you got to do to be granted an extra year. Trinidad Chambliss changes not just a lot for Ole Miss with his return, but he changes a lot as far as the landscape of the SEC goes this year. He, without a doubt, is one of the 3 best quarterbacks in the SEC coming back. And when you have a quarterback as good as Trinidad Chambliss with his playmaking ability, what he can do as far as being able to turn broken plays into great plays, he puts Ole Miss right back into the thick of the college football playoff race, and possibly maybe they're in contention for the SEC title. Now, they do lose a few key players to the transfer portal. Some of those guys follow Lane Kiffin, but you retained 2 of the most integral part for why your team was as successful as what they were last season. That was bringing back Keywan Lacey, and now you return his tag team partner, his partner in crime, Trinidad Chambliss. And what's a little bit odd about Trinidad Chambliss coming back for an extra year, normally guys who fight this hard like how Trinidad Chambliss did for another year of eligibility. They do it because they know they have no shot at making it at the next level. That's not the case for Chambliss, though. I thought Trinidad Chambliss, if he would have came out this year in the draft, he easily would have been QB2 right behind Fernando Mendoza. You're telling me that based on last season, you would draft Ty Simpson, Carson Beck, Drew Waller, God forbid, Garrett Nussmeier ahead of Trinidad Chambliss? Sure, he's undersized, but there's been guys like Kyler Murray, Bryce Young, who have had relative success at the NFL despite their small stature. If you were willing to take Bryce Young first overall, why would you not take a flyer on Trinidad Chambliss late in the first round, early in the second? He's a much better athlete than what Bryce Young is, has a way stronger arm than Bryce Young. I thought that Trinidad Chambliss, if he was in the draft this year, he easily would have been a second-round pick, the second quarterback taken off the board. Decades ago, guys used to fight for the right to enter the NFL draft, not to stay in college. Chambliss this season at Ole Miss will make more fully guaranteed money than what he probably would have made if he would have came out, what he was going to get paid the first few years on his rookie deal. Initially, it looked like Trinidad Chambliss was ducking the NFL, fighting so hard, tooth and nail to come back to Ole Miss for one last season, but he wasn't really ducking the NFL. He was just making a smart business decision, which was getting as much money as possible, and that's what he's going to get with Ole Miss this year. College football has changed so much with the amount of money that's being thrown around. If you have a player like Trinidad Chambliss that's not a guaranteed first-round pick, you throw $4 or $5 million at him, which is more than what he would make his first 2 years on his rookie deal if he's not a first-round pick, then you essentially gave him a Godfather offer that he couldn't refuse. Even if Trinidad Chambliss wanted to declare for the NFL draft, it's just too much money to pass up on. $4 or $5 million to play one lone season. The majority of mid-round selections make around like $2 to $4 million their first 3 years in the league, but none of that is fully guaranteed. Now, they do have fully guaranteed money inside of their rookie deals, but it's not as much as what Chambliss is going to be making in 2026 staying in Oxford. And if he would have came out, he would have went anywhere between round 2 to round 4. I don't think he would have had to wait that long to hear his name called compared to the other quarterbacks that we have. This was a very weak quarterback class. So coming out next year, sure, he gets more experience. He can improve. He can boost his draft stock. But you would have to think he had a higher chance getting drafted higher this year than what he possibly will get drafted next year, since the 2027 quarterback class looks like an all-time great class. I know we say this about every QB class coming up. The next quarterback class is always the next best thing, but next year really does look like a really great class. And with the physical limitations that Trinidad Chambliss has, being undersized, you know that's going to hurt him a little bit. So I'm not mad at him for coming back for another year. I think that it makes a ton of sense considering what these guys are getting paid. You saw Carson Beck come back for another season. He initially declared for the draft. Miami flipped him from the draft essentially and gave him a similar deal to what Ole Miss is giving Trinidad Chambliss this year. And Trinidad Chambliss coming back to Ole Miss doesn't do anything but help him. He gets more money in his pocket. He gets more experience, more reps for the NFL. Not only a chance to improve his draft stock, but also a chance to earn more money at the next level. Because let's say he picks up from where he left off last year and he's just as good, if not a lot better, especially with Pete Golden being the new head coach for the first time during the regular season. If he's able to get Ole Miss back to the CFP or they win 9-10 games, then if you're doing this at a school like Ole Miss that does really have a rich history of producing a lot of NFL quarterbacks outside of Eli Manning, then I don't see how there can be too many knocks on you when you're winning at a school that isn't as stacked as some of the blue blood programs out there like Ohio State, Bama, Georgia. So although it does kind of look like Trinidad Chambliss was ducking the NFL, hey, he made a smart business decision. He's a smart businessman. Come back, rack up $4 or $5 million this loan season, which would be more than what you'll probably make your first few years in the NFL. Improve your draft stock. We saw Carson Beck, Cam Ward, all leverage the draft for more money. And Trinidad Chambliss, hey, look, I don't like the fact that he's back. I would have loved to see him playing for my Pittsburgh Steelers, but this is a huge W for Ole Miss, a huge L for the NCAA. Trinidad Chambliss essentially broke the code. All you need to do to win another year of eligibility is just keep suing the hell out of them until you can get a judge that used to go to your university to rule in your favor. With Trinidad Chambliss returning to Ole Miss for one last season, it's time for me to reveal my top 10 quarterbacks for the upcoming 2026 college football season. These are projections. These rankings reflect how I feel these quarterbacks are going to play. This isn't one of these rankings that's solely based off last season. No, these are projections. So if you see a few guys here that you don't know about, write them down and do some homework on them, because I promise you a lot of the guys on this list, if not all of them, are going to be as good as advertised, if not maybe a lot better than what I think. Starting off at number 10, I have Gunnar Stockton. Gunnar Stockton was one of the most efficient quarterbacks in college football last year. Didn't turn the football over that much. Very accurate. Also very tough and gritty runner. Coming back in year two under the same scheme, same system, a better offensive line, a lot of experience coming back in that department around him. I can see Gunnar Stockton possibly being a Heisman finalist at the end of this season. How well he played against Tennessee is what sold me on him. Even before the Tennessee game, I had a lot of confidence in Gunnar Stockton. The knock on Gunnar Stockton is he isn't that flashy. He's kind of like Stetson Bennett, but has more physical gifts than what Stetson Bennett has. Stronger arm, a slightly better athlete. I really believe that we can see Gunnar Stockton build on what he did last year and then some. I'm just such a huge fan of his game. It's not a game that's going to douse you by any stretch, but you know what you're going to get out of Gunnar Stockton week in and week out. Consistent play. He's going to give you like 2 touchdowns through the air, maybe one on the ground, and he'll be a 65% or better completion guy. I don't think it gets better in terms of efficiency than Gunnar Stockton when it comes to quarterback play this upcoming season. Dante Moore comes in at number 9 for me. I think that Dante Moore is quietly the most overhyped quarterback in college football. Against some of the best teams that Oregon played last year, he didn't really look that good. Now, albeit the offensive line was up and down at times, he was battling through having several starting receivers down for the last 2 months of the season. But against Texas Tech, I wasn't really that wowed. Against Indiana, not only did he look bad, but the entire team looked bad. I just don't think that Dante Moore is better than the quarterbacks that I have ahead of him. Now, albeit last season was his first year as a full-time starter, and I thought he played good for the situation, just not good enough to be a potential top 3, top 5 pick in the draft, like how he was slated to be if he would have came out. I feel Dante Moore coming back for another season in Oregon definitely is something that's going to do him a lot of justice. You want to see him be a lot better at operating the quick game with a lot more efficiency. Yeah, he is a solid runner, but he's not really somebody that's going to burn you for 30, 40 yards. You're not really worried about Dante Moore killing you with his mobility. He does have a really good arm. I do think he has really good ball placement. And again, with him coming back for another season, Oregon getting pretty much all the receivers from last year back, including a healthy Evan Stewart, you can expect Dante Moore to take a really big step in improvement, but I don't think he's going to be better than starting off with Sam Leavitt. Sam Leavitt, he balled out at Arizona State these past 2 years, was monumental, and Arizona State getting to the college football playoffs a few years ago with Cam Scottaboo in the backfield. Sam Leavitt has a lot of similarities in his game to Bo Nix. Very elusive, very good working the quick game. You pair Sam Leavitt up with Lane Kiffin, I don't see how Sam Leavitt doesn't end up becoming one of the best quarterbacks in college football this year. If you don't view him in that regard already, you will very soon. Lane Kiffin has a very good eye for the quarterback position. Sam Leavitt was the best quarterback available in the portal this year, and you got him throwing to the 6'7" monster, Tredez Green, who's like a hybrid receiver / tight end. You also got a lot of other talented players that he's going to be throwing the football to. You should have a really good offensive line. With the Lane Kiffin effect and what Sam Leavitt is going to be surrounded around, I love him to have a very good season. He comes in at number 8 for me. Jayden Mayava, it's the most underrated quarterback in college football coming into this year. Jayden Mayava, if he would have declared for the draft this year, I thought he would have had a fair argument to be a top 10 pick or better. He's Caleb Williams, but not as athletic. Still a very good athlete, but he's not able to do what Caleb Williams had the ability to do when he was at SC, as far as making the impossible look possible. With Jayden Mayava, though, this dude is the best deep ball thrower in college football. This dude has superb ball placement, throwing the football outside of the numbers. You would like to see him clean up his mechanics, and sometimes he can get a little bit mistake prone, but as far as returning quarterbacks in the Big Ten go, there aren't too many that are better than Jayden Mayava, and he's a large reason why USC is viewed as a borderline playoff team. And if they can improve the offensive line, they can reload that receiver again, I can see Jayden Mayava being a potential Heisman contender. I think that there are so many quarterbacks that folks put over Jayden Mayava that simply are better than him. And I don't even see him rated in a bunch of top 10 quarterback rankings lists, at least for this time right now in the offseason, which is very shocking to me. Because if you watch USC play, there wasn't no way you couldn't have been impressed with how well Jayden Mayava played for the majority of last season. Damon Williams, I have him as the 6th best quarterback entering this upcoming season. This is Kyler Murray 2.0, but way more athletic. If you thought that Kyler Murray was one of the best midget quarterbacks that you ever saw play college ball, you need to go watch some tape on Damon Williams. Damon Williams had a very good first season starting for Washington as their full-time starter. Yeah, he had a few clunkers in there, like against Michigan. He was a little bit off, but I think that he has very good accuracy. He makes very good decisions with the football, and he's very hard to stop once he gets into the open field. And he's an annoying quarterback to have to go against if you're a defensive coordinator. There's so many times last season when you thought Washington was going to get off the field on 3rd down. They were going to have to punt the ball back to the opposition, and Damon Williams would end up finding a way to keep the drive alive and move the chains. I got a homie that played against Damon Williams, and he said that Damon Williams is legit. And there's a reason why Lane Kiffin was trying to steal this kid from Jedd Fisch. Damon Williams, anytime a guy like Lane Kiffin is trying to steal you away, yeah, you're legit. You're him. And Washington, don't be shocked if you see the Huskies get into the college football playoffs this year. Jedd Fisch does a really good job developing the quarterback position. He got it right with Noah Fafita when he was at Arizona. When he took this Washington job, you thought he would have took Noah Fafita with him since he was a proven productive starter, but he said, nah, like, I trust my recruiting, I trust my development, I'm going to go with Damon Williams. And Damon Williams, if we're talking about the most talented quarterback, I think he has to be number one in the Big Ten as far as talent goes. I think that he's more talented than Mayava, Julian Sand, Dante Moore, just with his skill set, what he can do, throwing on the run, off script. I don't think there's too many better improvisers than Damon Williams. Julian Sand comes in at number 5 for me. There's a lot of comparisons that I've seen for Julian Sand to Drew Brees. You definitely understand it. This dude has incredible anticipation. It's like as soon as Jeremiah Smith gets done running the route, the ball's right there. There's not too much that you can say to knock Julian Sand, other than at times he did tend to get a little bit rattled when you can get some hits on him. He started that game against Michigan off a little bit slow. Big Ten against Indiana, the Big Ten championship game against Indiana, the playoff loss to Miami. You know, he didn't play as well in those games as what he was throughout the regular season. But overall, I can't even call him a game manager, because even though he has all the qualities of a game manager, he doesn't have a lot of great physical traits, like a strong arm. He's not like an immaculate athlete or anything like that. But I do think that he has very elite accuracy, very good anticipation. And when you're good at throwing guys open before they finish their routes, normally that results in those receivers producing a lot more yak, since they can get the ball upfield a lot quicker with how you position it, with where you throw it. Julian Sand, when he declares, if he declares for the draft next year, it's going to be a very interesting conversation about where he's going to get slotted, because he's a little bit frail, not like physically imposing, not somebody that's going to show you that he looks like a football player in the gym, but he does have very good football IQ, very good pocket presence. It just doesn't have like the wow factor like some of these other guys ahead of him do. At number 4, I got Arch Manning. Yes, I am drinking the Texas and Arch Manning Kool-Aid this year. Arch Manning was the hottest quarterback during the second half of last season. The way that he ended last season, you got to be feeling very bullish on him and what Texas can do this season, especially when you go from throwing to Ryan Ringo to now throwing to both Ryan Ringo and Cam Coleman, and you're going to have an improved offensive line. I don't see how Arch Manning doesn't live up to that last name on the back of his jersey this year. Last season, you had some growing pains. You were trying to get acclimated to the scheme, your new teammates, but there were some really good games that Arch Manning had to close the season that gives me a lot of confidence that he's going to be one of the best, and there isn't going to be any ifs, ands, and buts about it. Listen, I get it. You got to see it to believe it if you're a hater or you're still on the fence about Arch Manning, but go back and watch his last 4 games to end the season. He definitely was a lot better coming out of this season than what he was coming in last season. At number 3, Byron Brown. Byron Brown, you may not know who this dude is, but I promise you, you'll know who he is at the end of this season. I'm not saying that Byron Brown is the second coming of Cam Newton for Auburn, but he looks pretty damn close to being that. Very good size. This dude is a freakazoid running the football. This dude runs the ball like he's Marshawn Lynch in his prime. If you're a defensive back, good luck trying to tackle Byron Brown, because you have no shot in hell at doing so. This is like Derrick Henry playing quarterback, and he follows Alex Golesh to Auburn, so he already knows the system. He already knows the scheme. You're giving him possibly more talent to throw the football to than what he had at USF. This man had 40-plus touchdowns last year at USF. He was a one-man wrecking crew. Some of the easiest money that I've ever made in my life was taking Byron Brown, whatever his anytime touchdown props were. Sometimes they were 0.5, sometimes they were 1.5, sometimes they were 2.5. There were like 6-7 games when Byron Brown had like 3 or more touchdowns, and you just couldn't stop this dude. You couldn't stop him on the ground. You couldn't stop him throwing the football. I can't wait for Alex Golesh to unleash the beast that is Byron Brown. If you don't know who Byron Brown is, you will eventually at the end of this season. You may look at this list and say, JT, you got Byron Brown at number 3? Who the hell even is this dude? You'll find out really soon. I promise you that. Trinidad Chambliss comes in at number 2. If he would have declared for the draft, I believe he would have been the second quarterback taken off the board. What does Ty Simpson do better than Trinidad Chambliss? Yeah, nothing. Trinidad Chambliss is better. You're not taking Trinidad Chambliss over Garrett Nussmeier or Drew Aller. Even if Dante Moore would have came out, I still would have took Trinidad Chambliss over Dante Moore. Trinidad Chambliss, what he did against Georgia was like watching a man possessed with the spirit of Tom Brady and Lamar Jackson put together. Whatever was going right for Ole Miss was just giving Georgia absolute fits on defense as far as how they were utilizing Trinidad Chambliss mobility. When Trinidad Chambliss gets outside the pocket, there's not a better quarterback throwing on the run. There's not a better quarterback at being able to turn nothing into something than what Trinidad Chambliss had the ability to do last year. He comes back with Keywan Lacey. Yeah, you're going to have a new OC, maybe a few new faces around you, especially on the offensive line. But Trinidad Chambliss is just one of those players that whenever he's on the field, he just has the chance. He just has an opportunity to just break a game open. And when he's on, he can literally win you a game like how we saw him do in Ole Miss playoff win over Georgia. And at number 1, I got Darian Mensah. I believe Darian Mensah is going to be the best quarterback in college football when this season is all said and done. This dude carried Duke to the ACC championship. Statistically, he was the second best quarterback in college football as far as touchdowns, passing yards, QBR, quarterback efficiency. Darian Mensah throws one of the best deep balls in college football. And you're pairing him up with Malachi Toney, one of the best deep threats, one of the most dynamic receivers in the game right now. You can see both Darian Mensah and Malachi Toney possibly in New York for the Heisman Trophy ceremony because they're finalists for it. Darian Mensah going to Miami all but guarantees that the ACC is Miami's to lose, and Miami more than likely will be in the Final Four. Darian Mensah could be better than Cam Ward. He's a lot better playing within the structure of an offense than what Cam Ward was. Darian Mensah doesn't really play a lot of backyard football. It's like 1, 2, 3, the ball's out. Very good making tight window throws. When Miami took Darian Mensah away from Duke, I was jumping up and down with joy, especially when you remember how Miami lost the recent national championship to Indiana. Carson Beck doing the game-winning book for IU to seal it. I don't think that's going to be the case with Darian Mensah. Darian Mensah, unlike Carson Beck, you're going to trust him to win the game. If you got to throw the ball 40, 50 times with Darian Mensah, he's going to get the job done. I wouldn't be shocked if we see Darian Mensah win the Heisman and possibly be the first quarterback taken off the board in the 2027 NFL draft. But this is my projection for who the top 10 quarterbacks in college football are going to be at the end of this season. Leave your top 10 quarterback rankings down in the comment section down below. If you disagree, I would love to compare, see how your list, how your rankings differs from mine. We got to talk about the outlook for Oklahoma going into the 2026 college football season. Before we dive into it, can I get a boomer sooner in the chat, man? Oklahoma fans, you guys do remember that we were one of the only groups of people on this planet that truly believed that Oklahoma was going to make it to the CFP. And I'm not an Oklahoma fan, by the way. I'm an honorary Oklahoma fan since you guys adopted me into your fan base. And we were trying to tell everybody around this time last year that Oklahoma wasn't going to be the Nebraska of the SEC. They had more than enough talent to be able to compete with the best of the best. And what's so funny is how Texas fans, the Shorthorn fans, were running their mouths about how John Mateer was overrated. He wasn't going to be that good against SEC competition. Oh, you just didn't have a good enough coach to get them to the CFP. And who would have thought that Oklahoma would have been the one in the college football playoffs and Texas was the team that was on the outside looking in, trying to cry their way in? Isn't that funny? Oklahoma humbled the SEC last year. The SEC thought that Oklahoma was just going to be dog food for everybody else. They weren't going to be able to get right with the best of the best in the conference. You saw what they did to Alabama. You saw what they were able to do against Tennessee. Based on what Oklahoma did last season, I think that more than proves that Oklahoma has staying power in the SEC, and not staying power to just be good enough. No, staying power to actually compete for the conference title, to be a mainstay in the college football playoffs. They went 10-3 last year with one of the toughest schedules in college football. And that was with John Mateer falling off once he came back from that finger injury that he had. What if John Mateer never got injured last season? That has to be one of the biggest what ifs in Oklahoma football history, because before he had that finger injury, he was playing lights out. He was looking as good as advertised, but once he came back, he just was never able to get in rhythm. His accuracy throwing downfield was very bad. You also couldn't trust him to make good decisions, throwing the football late. But going into his second season at Oklahoma with a way better supporting cast, last year, the only person he had to throw the football to was Isaiah Statine. As a matter of fact, it seemed like anytime Oklahoma's offense was putting touchdowns on the board, Isaiah Statine was the dude responsible for that. So you go to the transfer portal, you bring in some more firepower for John Mateer to throw to on the perimeter. Isaiah Statine comes back. You got to think that Oklahoma's offensive line will improve since they bring a good majority of last year's starters back. Even though some of those guys weren't really that good, don't worry about that. They went into the portal. They brought a few more big boys to compete with some of those guys that were slacking off last year. They did have a really good freshman offensive tackle last year, by the way. And why I'm so high on Oklahoma, why I think there's a possibility that they could be right back into the playoffs this year, is that they should finally be able to have an effective rushing attack. Their run game was on and off a lot last year. Sometimes they had the ability to run the football very well. Other times it was kind of I think this year, with your offensive line being a lot better, with what you have coming back, with what you bring in the transfer portal, that's going to boost that run game. That's going to help John Mateer also contribute on the ground, because when he was coming from Washington State, he was the best quarterback running the football with what he could do after contact. He's kind of built like a bull in a sense. When you're trying to tackle John Mateer, it's not the easiest task. He does have a tendency to fall forward. So I think with an improved offensive line, a more efficient rushing attack, that's going to take a little bit of some pressure off for John Mateer's shoulders. You should be able to have a lot more success getting the deep pass game going with play action. John Mateer is also entering his third season under offensive coordinator Ben Arbuckle. Remember, they came to Norman as a package deal. They already spent one season with each other at Washington State. So this is their third year together. I do think with John Mateer being fully healthy, you will see a much better version of him in 2026 than what we saw last year. And if Oklahoma is going to make it back to the college football playoffs this year, you need more out of John Mateer. John Mateer needs to be at least a top 5 or better quarterback in the SEC this year if OU hopes to make it back to the CFP. It's very hard to consistently have success in the SEC when you're mainly relying on an elite defense and good special teams. Now, you don't need John Mateer to be all world. You just need him to be slightly better than what he was last year, because the majority of games that Oklahoma played in, their defense at times what's their best offense. Their defense was coming away with turnovers, gifting the offense favorable field position. Hell, sometimes the defense was saying, you don't even need the offense to come back on the field, coach. We got you. We just going to go ahead and put the points on the board for you since your offense is struggling to do it. And there were times when Oklahoma did have some difficulty winning certain games because their offense was just flat and their defense couldn't come away with any takeaways. Your schedule, if you thought last year's schedule was hell, this year's schedule is even more difficult. I would be hard-pressed to say that the SEC somewhat is trying to make an example out of Oklahoma. They're trying to humble Oklahoma again, but we saw Oklahoma win 10 games last year with a difficult schedule. So this year, nothing really should change that much. Everybody in the SEC is playing a difficult schedule, but Oklahoma has to play 3 playoff teams from last year this year. You're playing Georgia and Athens very early into the season. You got Ole Miss, Texas A&M. Then later on, you got a date with Texas and Arch Manning, and you got to travel on the road to the Swamp against what should be a very feisty Florida team. But there is a lot to be high on about not just the short-term outlook when it comes to Oklahoma, but the long-term outlook. I think that their new GM, Jim Nagy, has a very good game plan for how he intends on continuing to recruit, utilize the transfer portal. You know, for Oklahoma, despite not having as deep as pockets as what Texas A&M have, they do a really good job in the portal. They had some really good portal pickups last year. They got some pretty good portal additions this year. On defense, you are going to be losing a few guys to the league, but Brent Venables is one of the best defensive minds in college football. So you will have to expect that they will just simply reload on that side of the ball. They still should have a pretty good secondary. But if Oklahoma is going to make it back to the CFP this year, you need John Mateer to take that next step. His improvement is going to determine if Oklahoma can make another playoff appearance. There's only been one team in the SEC since we first got the 12-team playoff that's been in it every year since it first started, and that's been Georgia. Can Oklahoma be that second team out of the SEC to make it back to the CFP for back-to-back seasons? John Mateer, he's going to have a strong say about that, but I don't see how you can't be high on the future of Oklahoma after nearly everybody was a Debbie Downer when it came to this program around this same time last year. Michigan has a very interesting outlook. You fire Sharon Moore for freaking and geeking with the staffer. Very ugly situation, but it was a blessing in disguise. You somehow won 9 games with a coach that you viewed as a bridge coach until you could find a much better upgrade, and you replaced Sharon Moore with Kyle Whittingham. And I don't understand why there's such a contingent out there that it's so focused on Kyle Whittingham's age and how his age is going to slow him down at Michigan. This is one of the most winningest coaches in all of college football over the last 15 years. If you can win multiple 10-win seasons at Utah, then you can have success at Michigan. And you can have success very fast at Michigan if you're Kyle Whittingham, considering that you did retain the guys on the roster that mattered as far as you being able to possibly get to the CFP in year 1, that being Bryce Underwood being the most important part of you taking this job. You obviously want to have a guy like that around. You don't want to see him leave. And I thought Bryce Underwood played pretty well as a 18-year-old. Now, I know from a box score or stat sheet standpoint, it wasn't really anything impressive, but this dude has some pretty good games. And with Kyle Whittingham bringing a much better coaching staff, a better OC, a better QB coach than what Bryce Underwood had to work with last season, you also finally gave this brother some receivers. I expect a huge breakout season under Bryce Underwood. Now, there's been a lot of quarterbacks like DJ Lagway, Arch Manning that we anointed a little bit too fast, solely based off the recruiting hype that they had. But if you watch Bryce Underwood, he's had a lot of glimpses of what he could be if the right coach can put it all together. And I think that Kyle Whittingham is the perfect fit. I mean, the quarterback that Kyle Whittingham had last year at Utah, Dan Pierre, initially, you had some concerns before he started the game for the Utes. How good is he going to be since he was coming from an option-heavy offense at his previous stop? Kyle Whittingham normally gets the right at quarterback. There's only been about maybe 1 or 2 seasons out of the last decade that Kyle Whittingham has coached where the quarterback play has just been an Achilles heel. And what if Bryce Underwood goes off? How good does that make Michigan? You're talking about a team that possibly could be competing for the Big Ten championship, possibly could maybe win a playoff game or two, because we know that Michigan is going to be good on the offensive line. They're going to be good running the football. Jordan Marshall comes back, 10 touchdowns, averaging 6.2 yards per carry. He could have an even bigger year since we know Kyle Whittingham, he loves running the football, which is why the hiring of Kyle Whittingham by Michigan was such a match made in heaven, since Kyle Whittingham, everything that he wants his teams to be is what Michigan's identity has been over the last few years when they've been playing their best football. On defense, your secondary should be very good. How's that pass rush going to look, though? Now, I think for Kyle Whittingham in year one, even though on paper, this probably won't be a 10-plus win team, they do have a workable schedule. So I do think that the ceiling for Michigan is 10 wins or more. You win a first-round playoff game or you get a first-round home playoff game. The floor is 8 wins. Even if Michigan does struggle in year one under Kyle Whittingham, I don't think they're going to be like a 6 or 7 win team, because if you won 9 games with Sharon Moore, Kyle Whittingham being a definitive upgrade from Sharon Moore should do nothing but increase your floor. And the floor for Michigan last year probably was like 6, 7 wins. You thought there was going to be a steep drop off with everything they had going on, from Jim Harbaugh's departure, the NCAA sanctions and all of that. And 4 out of 6 of Michigan's toughest games this year are at home. OU, Iowa, Penn State, Indiana. Now, your last 3 games of the season, absolutely brutal. Oregon, Ohio State, and 2 of those last 3 contests, those are going to be some really tough games. And those could be the games that decide if Michigan makes or misses the CFP. I think if they win one of those games, they can go 10-2 and get in. But if they lose both of them, there's a high probability that they're an 8, 9 win team. But I love the hiring of Kyle Whittingham. I really don't understand why there's a few naysayers about this move. For Michigan to be in the situation that they were in, having to hire a head coach last minute, to walk away with somebody that has the resume and the accomplishments of Kyle Whittingham, I don't see how you can be low on this. I don't see how the ceiling for Michigan isn't at least 10 wins and the floor 8 wins or better. Miami making it to the national championship this past season officially stamps the U being back. And with the U officially being back, that means that the Miami haters are back and they're louder than ever. Oh, it's going to take Miami another 25 years to ever come that close to winning the national championship. No, it's not. It's not going to even take Miami longer than a year to get back to the national championship, because Darian Mensah is coming in at quarterback. And Darian Mensah was one of the best quarterbacks in college football last year at Duke. He led Duke to the ACC championship. And I know that Duke really wasn't that good. They were a 5-loss conference champion, but they would have been a lot worse if they didn't have Darian Mensah. Darian Mensah at Duke, where he wasn't really playing with a bunch of NFL caliber players. His offensive line was all right, but it's not like the dude was playing with some of the best players in America, like how he's going to be doing at Miami. Can you imagine the kind of damage that Darian Mensah and Malachi Tony are going to do this upcoming season? You could see both Darian Mensah and Malachi Tony be possible Heisman finalists this upcoming season. You look at what Darian Mensah was doing at Duke, second in college football in passing yards and passing touchdowns. Unlike Carson Beck, Darian Mensah isn't a game manager. You don't have to just ask Darian Mensah to not lose the game like how you had to a Carson Beck because you couldn't trust him. You can trust Darian Mensah. Darian Mensah, you can tell him, hey, put the cape on and carry us to a win, and he can get it done. He can throw the ball 30 plus, 40 plus times and win you a game. If he won the ACC championship at Duke, which is a basketball school with Manny Diaz, then there's no chance in hell Darian Mensah doesn't even top what he did last year at Miami. Like, there's no way Darian Mensah doesn't end up becoming one of the best quarterbacks in the history of Miami football when this season is all said and done. I think that Darian Mensah could be better than Cam Ward. Cam Ward, the difference between him and Darian Mensah is that Cam Ward's game was predicated off playing a lot of backyard football, a lot of improvising, turn a bad play into a great play. Darian Mensah is a lot better playing within the structure of an offense than what Cam Ward was when he was coming into Miami. You're going to see Darian Mensah get the ball out very fast. He's going to be very efficient, but he also is going to be able to stretch the field. What's very impressive about Darian Mensah's tape is how well he throws the football outside the numbers, especially against tight man-to-man coverage. And with Malachi Tony, I don't see how you don't see Darian Mensah put up prolific numbers. Malachi Tony himself could go for 1,500 yards since he has a much better quarterback throwing him the football. With Darian Mensah, not just does he have very good deep ball accuracy, but he also throws the ball with very good anticipation. He's very good at throwing guys open. And when you have a quarterback that has very good anticipation, your receivers, you know how they benefit from that? They get a lot of yak because you're putting them in positions to where they can easily catch the ball and turn upfield. And we know how good of a deep threat Malachi Tony is, but we also know how good Malachi Tony is when he has the ball in his hands, what he can do as a playmaker. And not only is Malachi Tony going to greatly benefit from Darian Mensah's arrival in South Florida, but you can expect Miami's third down efficiency to be a lot better than what it was last season, because when you have a quarterback like Darian Mensah that's just very good throwing with anticipation, throwing guys open, it makes you very hard to stop on third down because he does have a little bit of mobility. Now, he's not as mobile as what Cam Ward was. He's not like a burner or anything like that, but he can do enough to keep a drive alive. But on third down, that's really when you're going to see Darian Mensah's skill set really show you how much that elevates Miami's offense. Because in third down situations, efficiency is key. And there aren't too many more efficient quarterbacks that you will find than Darian Mensah. Darian Mensah is going to lead Miami to their first ACC championship in program history. I know they've been in this conference for over several decades and still haven't won an ACC title. That's going to change this year. When you have a guy that had a 34-6 touchdown interception ratio at Duke, who's not going to randomly implode against inferior competition like how Carson Beck did against SMU and Louisville, you're going to have more consistency throughout the season. You're not going to be as volatile offensively with Darian Mensah as you were with Carson Beck. You didn't really know what you were going to get out of Carson Beck for the middle portion of last year. Darian Mensah, from week 1 to the final week of the regular season, Darian Mensah is going to be one of the best quarterbacks in college football. You can trust Darian Mensah with the ball in his hands to win a game late. I think with everything Miami's going to have around Darian Mensah, we know the offensive line is going to be elite because Mario Cristobal is a great offensive line coach. You also have one of the best offensive line coaches on his staff along with them. He's going to have some of the freakiest offensive linemen that you've ever seen. And on top of that, not just do you have Malachi Tony, but you also have a lot of other good receivers behind him. Hell, there's a receiver that made a smart business decision to leave Duke and follow Darian Mensah to Miami. So the fact that you have players following Darian Mensah to Miami tells you everything that you need to know about how good this guy is. I'm very excited to see what Darian Mensah is going to do for Miami. When Miami lost the national championship after Carson Beck threw that book, I was very hurt. I had to take a little bit of a bye week. But once I saw the news we were getting Darian Mensah, I wasn't even tripping on the Indiana loss anymore. I was just saying to myself, when Darian Mensah gets here, you're in trouble. And everybody's going to be in trouble. All the Miami's going to take them 25 years to get back to the national championship. They're at least going to be in the Final Four of Darian Mensah. When you have a quarterback this good and you have an elite roster around them, how can you not see Miami at least making it to the semifinals of the CFP? Last week, I revealed my way too early top 25 for this upcoming season. Now I'm here to reveal my way too early full college football playoff predictions. I have my bracket made. I'm going to be giving you guys my full 12-team CFP field along with my round-by-round predictions and my way too early national champion. Starting off, my 12-team field. I have Miami at 1 as the ACC conference champ, Texas at 2 winning the SEC, Indiana going back-to-back as Big Ten champs, and LSU, despite not winning the SEC, getting the last top 4 seed and the last first-round bye, since I think their only loss is going to come to Texas. So the at-large bids, I have Notre Dame at 10, road playoff game against Alabama and Tuscaloosa, Washington at 11, going on the road to take on Oregon in a rematch. This will be the second time these two teams will play this year. I got UNLV being the G5 team that gets in at 12, going on the road to take on Texas Tech. And I got Ohio State on the road in Athens against Georgia, and what probably will be one of the best first-round playoff games that we'll ever see. Now, advancing to the second round, I'm taking Notre Dame over Alabama. I love the potential that Alabama's offense has with Keelan Russell possibly winning that quarterback battle over Austin Mack. You do have some questions about how good Alabama's going to be on the line of scrimmage with their offensive line, defensive line. How improved is their run game going to be? Notre Dame has a way better team than Alabama, at least right now. There's not really any concerns about Notre Dame since they returned a lot of guys from last year. They also brought in some very good players out of the transfer portal. There's not really too many weaknesses that Notre Dame has. You have some concerns about who's going to replace Jeremiah Love, Darian Price, but outside of that, you got a proven quarterback, a really good coaching staff, a lot of experience on defense. I got Oregon, Indiana in round 2. I think that Oregon takes down Washington in the first round. I think that Washington, even if they do win one against Oregon in the regular season, I can't see them beating Oregon twice in the same year. And I just think that Washington still has some ways to go to catch Oregon with how well Oregon has recruited, how well they develop, and their ability to go in the transfer portal and pretty much get anybody that they want. Texas Tech versus LSU. I got Tech over UNLV in round 1. I love me some Dan Mullen, but I don't think they'll make it past the first round. Texas Tech, once again, they're doing what they did last year, buying the best team in the Big 12 that money can buy. And with Brandon Sorsby at quarterback, you have a higher ceiling in the playoffs than what you had last year. And then I got Georgia beating Ohio State. Ohio State has a good offense. Defensively, they're going to have a lot of new faces on that side of the ball. Georgia has a more experienced team than Ohio State. They also recruit on the same level. So I think with Georgia being the more experienced team, especially on defense, that's what gives them the edge over Ohio State, especially if you're going to be playing that game at home. So the second round of the playoffs, I got Georgia versus Miami, Notre Dame versus Texas, Oregon versus Indiana, a rematch from this past year's playoffs in the semifinals. And then I got Texas Tech versus LSU. Who's going to the Final Four? I got LSU over Texas Tech. I think that with what Lane Kiffin has done in the transfer portal, his history with getting the most out of the guys that he gets out of the portal, you're going to see LSU be in the national championship conversation as quickly as this year. I don't have any questions about if Lane Kiffin is going to win a natty at LSU. My only question is, how fast is he going to be able to do it? And with their transfer portal class being as loaded as what it is, some say this is an all-time great portal class with them bringing in some of the best guys out of the portal. Jordan Seaton, arguably the best offensive tackle available. Sam Levitt was the best quarterback available. Prince Will, Imani Allen was the best pass rusher available. So there's just so many high-level players that LSU gets out of the portal, along with guys like Trudez Green coming back, the 6'7" monster at receiver. I don't see how LSU misses out on the CFP this year, let alone not make it to the semifinals. Texas Tech, they have a lot of money put into this year's team, but they still don't have the same amount of blue chip talent that LSU has. And I do think that they have the staff advantage. I'm taking Oregon to get the best of Indiana this go around. Last year, Oregon had the inexperienced team. Indiana had the more experienced team, and you definitely could tell Oregon had a bunch of procedural penalties, pre-snap penalties, bad mistakes that you expect from a young player in his first year as a starter. Indiana, with the amount of veterans that they're going to be losing this year, I wonder if they're going to be as disciplined as what they were last year, because you could say that was the best coached team in the history of college football. Maybe not the best team in the history of college football, but definitely one of the best well coached. I got Texas over Notre Dame. Texas has the best team that money can buy this year. You already had Ryan Ringo. Now you're pairing him up with Cam Coleman, which without a doubt is the best wide receiver duo in college football this year. Arch Manning should look like the golden boy that we expected him to look like at the start of last season. It took him a while to get going, but with how hot he was to end the second half of last year, you got to expect that to carry over. They also hired Ole Muschamp as their new defensive coordinator, replacing Kiwatowski, who was pretty good. Like, Texas had like a top 20 defense last year. With them bringing in Ole Muschamp, this could be a top 10 or better unit this year. And I do think that Notre Dame is a good team. This will be a dogfight. I just got Texas edging them out. I got Miami beating Georgia. Georgia has the experience on their side, but Miami has the quarterback advantage, the line of scrimmage advantage, since they've done a lot better recruiting on the line of scrimmage than what Georgia has. We don't know how improved Georgia's pass rush is going to look this year. Their pass rush was their biggest issue on defense last season. So Miami, to me, despite not having the more experienced team, I do think they are the more talented team of the two. And my Final Four, my semifinal prediction for right now, way too early, semifinal prediction, I got Miami versus LSU and Texas versus Oregon. Now, my national championship prediction, I got Miami versus Texas, playing for it all in the Natty this year. Both of these two teams have two of the best rosters that money can buy. They're blue blood programs. Both of these teams are looking to truly say that they are back, submitting that with a national championship win. And would this not be one of the best national championships of all time? Not too often do you see two blue blood programs like Miami and Texas, who have both been irrelevant for the majority of our lifetimes, finally back playing for the national title. And unfortunately, despite being a Miami fan, I'm taking Texas to win it all. I think that Texas has too much money wrapped up into this year's team to not win a national championship. This is this year's Penn State. Either they're going to unravel early after the first month and a half of the season, or they're going to rise to the occasion and they're going to play as good as what they spent on this team. And Texas boosters, Texas alum, Texas donors are expecting a national championship. And if they don't get that, I think that it would be fair game to fire Steve Sarkisian. You may think that's crazy, but with the amount of money that they poured into this team, with Will Muschamp being added as a defensive coordinator, how many good recruiting classes they've been able to stack on top of each other, along with having a phenomenal transfer portal class, Texas better win that freaking national championship this year. I wouldn't be shocked if Miami wins it, but I just think that Texas, all across the board, is just loaded everywhere. Offensive line, receivers, you got the quarterback situated, you improved running back in the transfer portal, your defense is going to be even better with Will Muschamp. Texas is my pick to win the national championship. We still have a long way to go throughout this offseason, so you can expect a few more of these way too early CFP brackets out of me. But for right now, in February, this is how I think the playoffs is going to play out.